Good morning, everyone. We'll call into session One Ohio Recovery Foundation Board of Directors September meeting. And as the first item of business, Lori, do you mind doing a roll call for us?
Julie Amon. Here. Tom Whiston. Here. Chahandrew.
Here.
Matt Old. Don Mason.
Here.
Greta Mayer. Here. Alicia Bruce. Here. Ron Luce.
Here.
Ted St. John.
Here.
Jeanette Wordsbicky. Judy Dodge. Here. Denise Drehas. Here. Kim Tojado. Don Tyler Lee. Here. David Mattia. Dwayne Piccirilli.
Here.
Greta Johnson.
Here.
Scott Silac. Tom Margois.
Here.
Larry Kidd.
Here.
Jonathan Lee.
Here.
Robert Radcliffe.
Here.
Michael Royson.
Here.
James White.
Here.
Rachel Baker. Here. Evan Kleemeyer.
Here.
Terry Johnson. Phil Plumer.
Yeah, Dave Mattia is here online.
He just came on.
Okay, and we have Judge Mattia joined us. So we have a quorum, I think it's 21. So thank you very much. We'd like to start today's agenda, and this is something we tend to do more often than I ever imagined, by welcoming a new member of our board, Jim White. And Jim, if you don't mind, introduce yourself. You're just recently appointed by the Honorable Governor Michael DeWine.
Yes, thank you very much. Super happy to be here. Very honored and privileged to be appointed by the governor. Just a little background about myself. From Toledo, Ohio originally. I spent the last, 22 years now in Columbus. And for those last 22 years, I've been in the investment industry with both Merrill Lynch and Morgan Stanley as a private wealth advisor. This issue or these issues really do kind of hit close to home for me and our family. We have my wife has a cousin who actually passed away about 3 years ago of addiction. So I'm very honored and privileged to be here and to help in any way I can. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim. And I'd also like to introduce, I believe we have Jonathan Lee, who has joined us virtually. Jonathan, can you unmute and introduce yourself to everybody?
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the welcome. And I, too, am extremely honored that Governor DeWine has appointed me to be a part of this work. I am from the Cleveland, Ohio area, born and raised and still up here. I'm the founder of Signature Health, and we are a community mental health center and a federally qualified health center that works with about 35,000 patients, have a very large medication-assisted treatment program where we have several hundred people undergoing treatment for their opioid addiction. And I am also a recovering person myself. With any luck, we'll celebrate 38 years of sobriety in a couple of weeks here. So this is something very near and dear to me as well. And so it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much.
Thank you very, very much, Jonathan. And finally, I'd like to introduce Alicia Bruce, who's joining us from the Region 16 board. And Alicia, would you mind telling us about you?
My name is Alicia Bruce. I have worked in the behavioral health space for the last 25 years, the last 13 years specifically in program development around the opioid crisis, starting with one of the earliest Governor Kasich initiatives, Recovery to Work. I'm very comfortable in this space and very excited to be here. My background is primarily rural, so I was actually born and raised in Columbus, graduated high school and college here, and then decided to give the rural life a try in my late 20s to raise my family, which I've been able to do and have a very nice career in social work. I have no regrets. I think it's a great thing to look back on your life and be able to say,
recording in progress.
So, to be here and just to learn more about how we can continue to progress with the changes as they go and to assist people with opioid use disorder, their families, and also victims of overdose, which would be the children and families.
Thank you so very much. And I'd like to also welcome our guests who are joining us in person as well as virtually. And please remember, if you have comments, want to give us feedback, just email at info@oneohiofoundation.com. Is that right? .com?
That's correct.
Okay, info@oneohiofoundation.com. One little bit of a reminder, and by the way, I want to really thank Larry for the work he did over the last couple of years to get virtual attendance as a part of our accepted into law. This has really helped us today. But then again, before we get into details of the agenda, just want to remind everybody how important it is to try to RSVP early to these so that our board can understand if we're going to have a quorum. That helps us with our scheduling, and especially the importance of today's meetings and October's meetings. It's really important that we have a quorum. If it's not possible, please let our staff know just really as soon as possible. One of the things I want to put on your flag, if you haven't already looked at your calendar in October, but we're having a special session on Tuesday, the 29th from 10:30 to 12:30. It will be a virtual meeting. So if you're using the, it's not called ShareBoard, what's our software? What is it? Onboard. If you're using Onboard or getting the emails, it should be in October 29th, 10:30, 12:30. Please accept it because we'll need your quorum at that meeting as well. It's our hope to vote on the remaining regional grants so that we can ensure that our staff can connect with all the grant recipients and initial payments can start flowing to the grantees. Thank you. So next item is really the agenda approval as our first order of business. We've had the agenda sent out and published. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda as proposed? By Mr. Kidd. Second. By Evan. Second by Evan. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Opposed, and the motion carries. Next thing is we had our minutes sent out. And again, those are draft until accepted. Is there a motion to accept the minutes as published?
I move.
By Mr. Lucy. Loose. I'll get it right. I
Please
keep
not.
thinking of getting the NFL middle linebacker for Detroit Lions. So, and you know so much alike, by the way. Is there a second to the motion? Okay.
Second.
By Mercy. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, and the motion carries. Now, as a reminder, this is Recovery Month, National Recovery Month. It's national observance every September to support and promote new evidence-based treatment and recovery practices. Our nation's strong and proud recovery community and the dedication of service providers and communities who make recovery in all forms happen. So this year's theme is hope is real, recovery is possible, and I don't think any of us can agree more. I know that we have focused on a number of individuals who have died from this disease, and it's important we continue to acknowledge those in recovery. So as a part of that, we have our mission moment with a personal story. In light of this, we want to highlight, as we've done every month, one person who has been impacted. Rachel, I believe you have remarks to make in this subject matter. Rachel Baker.
Great. Thank you so much for the invitation to present today. So today we have the opportunity to hear the story of an Ohioan personally impacted by addiction. Tony Dybel grew up in Northwest Ohio, supported by a loving family. As a child, Tony's mom worked as a teacher and his father coached him and his siblings in multiple sports. The oldest of 3 children, Tony attended Bowling Green High School where he played basketball. However, it was during this time that Tony first began using alcohol and drugs. He quickly realized that using substances had a different effect on him compared to the effects of his friends. Despite using the same substances, Tony's friends did not quickly develop the persistent need to use them again in the same way that Tony did. Still in high school, Tony's drug use soon became persistent and problematic. While none of his immediate family struggled with addiction, this disease impacted his extended family greatly, with Tony having multiple cousins who have lost their lives due to addiction. As Tony's drug and alcohol use began to progress in high school, he tried prescription painkillers for the first time, which had a major impact on his life. Tony attended high school in the late 2000s, and prescription opioids were an easily accessible substance at that time for him and his friends. After graduating high school, Tony attended and graduated from the Ohio State University, where he majored in public health. While in college, prescription opioids became increasingly difficult to find, and Tony began using heroin. After a long journey and multiple stints in treatment, Tony is now in long-term recovery. In total, Tony lost 10 plus adolescent and young adult developmental years to addiction. Today, Tony works as the overdose prevention coordinator for the Lucas County Health Department, a position he began in August 2021. In this role, Tony is the regional lead for a Northwest Ohio focused grant that seeks to build prevention capacity in smaller rural counties. Tony is also involved in the Lucas County Opioid Coalition. He is married with a daughter who recently turned 2, and this year he had the opportunity to speak at a national public health conference and ran in the Boston Marathon. As an individual in recovery who now works in the public health space, Tony is passionate about expanding treatment and recovery services for others experiencing addiction, recognizing that he is fortunate to have had the opportunities he did to enter and sustain long-term recovery. Tony works to remind people that addiction is a brain disorder and we should have empathy for individuals struggling with a substance use disorder. He also wants people to know that recovery can look unique for everyone, and the opposite of addiction is connection. We thank Tony for sharing his story with us.
Thank you so much, Rachel. And I'd like to thank also Tony Dibble and his family for sharing their story and the lovely photo that we had. Please know that we are inspired by their story, and we'll celebrate this month and every month for them. Now a communications update. I'd like to turn the floor over to Connie Luck, our communications lead.
Morning, everyone. Thanks for giving me a couple minutes. I know we have a packed agenda, so I'm going to roll through things pretty quickly this morning, but it's been a while since we've provided an update to the board and wanted to give you a quick snapshot of some of the earned media that we've been able to generate over the last 9 months or so, especially with the lead up to and throughout the application process. Early on, we were able to generate a lot of really positive coverage. If you recall, we had an exclusive advanced placement with the AP, which generated about 200 hits on our RFP release back in March, which is significant to have that many hits. So that really helped us get the word out to a lot of people around the state and frankly around the country about what's going on in Ohio. We followed that up with several other hits, just a couple of highlights here, a couple op-eds by some of your fellow directors, encouraging organizations in their areas to apply for the funding. And then as the team was traveling around the state, meeting with different stakeholder groups in different regions, we did as much earned media as we could. And there are a couple of examples of interviews that Alicia did in Dayton and Youngstown, as well as what was essentially a statewide interview on Spectrum News that would have aired anywhere where they have coverage, and they're in 85 out of 88 counties. So that was a great hit to have on Spectrum. I don't know who has that, thanks. And then just a couple other things I wanted to point out. By being out in the community, we were able to generate some great positive coverage. The Vindicator in Youngstown had a really nice editorial after our stakeholder meeting there, encouraging organizations to apply for the funding, which is always great to have that other voice coming in, amplifying what we're doing. And then we had a third-party group do an op-ed in the Plain Dealer, which was a surprise to us. And it was great to see them talking about the mission of the foundation and how the work that you're doing here and the work that the team's doing every day can have a really positive impact on the state. And then obviously we're continuing our stakeholder communications. Kevin and I work together closely on our email distributions with the email distribution system to get out regular quarterly updates. We also obviously send out a recap after every board meeting. We typically have over 60% open rate on those, and I think Kevin would say an industry standard would be closer to 30 to 40%. So we're having really good engagement with those Ohioans who have signed up to receive updates from us. They're looking at what we're sending them, and they're getting that information, which is also usually amplified on social media as well. And then for Recovery Month, many of you hopefully saw that we pushed out an email recently asking organizations to share the events that they're hosting around the state. Kevin created a webpage that has all of that information. So one thing, if you're out and about and you're attending these, please take a picture, send it to us so we can share that. We want to really celebrate the work that's being done in the communities around Ohio. And then, we're obviously really excited to begin a great storytelling opportunity as we're getting grants out the door. So we wanted to just take a moment to walk through, as you all are out and about in your communities, how we can help you answer questions, respond to media, to make sure that we're being very responsive to their requests. We know that a lot of times reporters might have a deadline that's 2 hours after they ask you a question, and that's where I'm here to help. We want you all to be out in your communities. You each bring a really unique perspective and, life experience, personal experience, professional experience to the board, and you're great, instruments for us to get the word out in your communities. So when you go to events, when you're out in the community, we obviously want you to tell the story of One Ohio, but we want to make sure that you're prepared, to answer questions. And if you're not, it's always okay to say, you know what, let me have Connie give you a call so we can get that information to you. A lot of times, if you're getting a call from a reporter, they may have already called me, but I'm not going to call each of you and say, hey, we got this reporter call today. This is what they're asking about. So, never hesitate to reach out to us. And things are moving so quickly, as we all know, that between yesterday and today, or last hour and this hour, things may have changed about where we are in the process of approving grants and where the different regions are. So that's where Alicia and Sarah and I and others on the team can have those conversations, get that background of the reporter, and make sure that they have the most accurate information possible. And it's all really coming down to, look, also, we know that despite all of the work we've done as an organization and through your leadership on the board to be, I would say, the most transparent nonprofit in the country, there's still a lot of confusion around the settlements, around the Ohio system. We're very different than many other states, most other states. It's not uncommon for me to spend 30 minutes, an hour on the phone with a reporter, helping them understand our process and where things stand and the history of the foundation. So, we want to make sure, again, that we are being responsive and that we're continuing to carry forward that mission of openness and transparency through a united voice. So just quickly, as you're out at local events, again, obviously want you to share our story, encourage organizations to learn about One Ohio, but also, make sure that if, again, you have a question that comes to you and you don't have all the details, just kick it over to me. We do have some talking points, I believe, and a fact sheet with some basic details about the process that hopefully is a good resource for you just to reference as you're in the community. And then as we have grant awards going out, we'll have additional documents for you to reference just as a cheat sheet to make sure that, everybody's speaking with one voice on this information. That's it. There's more. Is that it? Oh, okay. I thought I had one more slide.
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions on any? I know that was fast, but
Could you talk a little bit about, as the grant recipients become public, what plans do we have? Press events, press releases? How are we announcing that? If you've already done that and I missed it, that's my fault.
Sure. Yep. We'll jump ahead to that. So one thing that we're putting in our recaps, and I've been talking to reporters about, is helping them understand the process of the approvals here, and then getting grant awards signed, and then having more detailed grant award releases going out. So we're gonna be continue to talk through that with reporters around, so they understand what to expect, as well as our organizations that have applied for funding. But
I can't get there fast
Is-
enough. Andy, can you skip to that slide?
Which slide?
It's the slide that explains the communication process.
It's in the grant and region update section.
so, but basically, when we leave these meetings and you all make an approval, there's still staff work that has to happen to get a grant agreement signed. Once the grant agreements are signed, then likely in October, we will have press releases going out with region-specific project approvals. We'll also have a place on the website where that information will live. Behind all of this, as grant agreements are being signed, we've created a media and marketing guide for grantees. So they will have a social media toolkit. They'll have answers to questions they may have around, well, what if I want to do an event? Who do I call? We want to do this. We want to send out a press release. We'll have sample press releases for them to use if they want to send something out from their organization. So we'll be providing them with a lot of that guidance as they're getting that grant agreement. Obviously, there may be some events that we want to try to partner with organizations on, so we'll be doing that as well. Unfortunately, we can't do an event for every award, obviously, but we're gonna try to do as many as we can. But also, we have a long runway here where the dollars will be going out over a long period of time. And so there may be some that are ready to do an event this year. There may be some where it's like, maybe we should do it in February because there's a clear, point of, action happening. So let's go to that organization and tell that story then. So there will be a lot of focus this fall on, I think, the initial releases and the, just the who, what, when, and where the dollars are going. But then we'll continue that storytelling over the next several months and years. And then obviously we'll be layering on more programs and things in the future. So we're really excited. I know Kevin and I are really excited to begin this phase. It's to highlight these groups that are really, boots on the ground, front lines, combating this addiction epidemic. And we're gonna do everything we can on the comm side to really amplify their work and celebrate their work.
Connie, if we do get contacted by media and need to reach out to you quickly, what's the best way to do that?
Cell phone, and if you guys don't have my information, I'll make sure that Lori gets it to you, but I have cards here as well. Or text, email, whatever. I mean, I'm kind of constantly on watching for this stuff. So whatever is most convenient for you, but text or call is usually fastest.
Thank you.
And you'll also help how we answer the ones that are gonna be calling, screaming because they didn't get any money.
Well, we all know, unfortunately, when we had a
I
half
can
a
tell you
billion.
right now.
Yeah.
I know a few that will be.
Well, and that's, it's maybe a great problem to have that we had a $500 million worth of requests. We have $51 million to distribute this year. We know that there's more need than dollars to distribute, but this is the first of many cycles. And, I know that our team is constantly looking at other ways that we can support these groups. Maybe there are other resources available that they're not aware of through the state or other grant opportunities. So there are a lot of those connections that I know our team will be working to make. But yes, absolutely, we anticipate that. Unfortunately, is part of a grant process, but it's also the first of many opportunities. And certainly, this organization is in this for the long haul, and we want to make sure that great organizations are supported any way we can at the time that we have resources to help them.
Well, thank you.
All right, thanks.
Thank you very much, Connie. Now we'll move on. Next item on the agenda is the Strategic Plan Ad Hoc Committee. I know many of us were able to come together for the July board retreat. From those trainings and discussions, we've begun a process of updating our vision and mission statements to ensure all volunteers and staff have clarity on where the foundation is headed. So with that, I'd like to turn over to Alicia at this point.
Certainly. Good morning. Thank you all. And I first want to thank you for the hard work and the feedback that you've provided, as our chair mentioned, at the retreat. And since then, I know I've had a number of conversations with several of you. And then we have our members who have been serving on the strategic ad hoc committee, who kind of started that process on the board retreat committee and kind of got merged into the strategic ad hoc committee. So we really appreciate you all's leadership and time to develop the recommendations that you all should have had in your packets on board, and we'll see here today. But before we jump into this, I just wanted to spend a couple minutes talking about and reflecting on that feedback and where we've been to get to that mission and vision draft that we'll talk more in depth. And that really starts with the presentations that we've heard in the past. I know that some of you are new members, so I think this recap will be important for you as well, because you didn't get the opportunity to be at our July meeting. But we really have had several great presentations to talk a lot about the history of addiction, that addiction is treatable, and a treatable chronic disease, and it has a lot of complexities. And we learned from Dr. Whitney what those complexities are and how addiction over hundreds of years has continued to evolve and is still evolving. And so I thought that was really great context that Dr. Whitney provided, as well as just, so what are those things that we need to know? Kind of thinking about our work and how we'll approach addiction and substance use disorders. And thinking about that long history requires long-term solutions. We've heard new trends like xylazine, and yesterday we were on the phone with the coroner's office talking about new drugs that are on the street. The problem is going to be ever-changing, ever-evolving, and it really has that psychosocial, I cannot say that, kind of perspective to it that really we need to think about not only those treatments, but those community impacts, those family impacts, those life impacts as we talk about this disease. And finally, he talked about that there was hope. And that really resonated in a lot of your comments and feedback that we're going to go through today, is that hope for the future. We also have understood that in our conversations and in our retreat, that there has been a lot of parallels to the opiate settlements to those of the tobacco settlements. And I thought that was a very interesting dialogue that we've had to understand what worked out of that tobacco settlement, what didn't work, and what are those lessons learned. And so hearing from the Truth Initiative, I thought, was another great point, in seeing that they have been, and there is hope for an ability to move the needle in an area where, in a health area. They've proven that that's possible through coordinated, sustained efforts, and showed us that youth cigarette prevalence was in 1998, when they got their start 25 years ago, at some of its highest rates, and how they've been able to drive cigarette use down now. And how that has changed to vaping, and how they're still there to really address that evolution. And so we found that as staff very encouraging, that our work will be meaningful. And if in those cases we are kind of persistent and intentional, that we can do the same when it comes to the health issues that we're trying to address through the foundation today. They also shared many lessons learned as a foundation, and I thought that this was really helpful as a group that got the same and similar start from tobacco settlements that really was 25 years ago, saying some of the same things to start up that we're saying. They really talked about the ability they wish they had the ability early on to define future success, develop a strategic plan and stick to it. They talked about being able to constantly adapt, and how evaluation is vital, and really making sure that they had those tools in place to make sure that the funds that they were investing meant something and had an impact. And so that has all really been helpful information, I think, to us as a staff, I think that from your feedback, we heard a lot about how that was helpful for you all to hear as well. And really saw that as we think about our work, our purpose, as kind of a catalyst into what we need to do as an organization next. And so, as you all know, this should look familiar from our new members. This is straight from our articles of incorporation. We have 3 purposes laid out, and that is to promote, to advocate, to fund. And I know we've spent a lot of time on the funding part. That's a really important part of who we are and what we will do. But moving into 2025, we'll talk about this more in October. We want to bring to you a plan to start to move in our ability to promote and advocate. And we're really excited to get your feedback on how best to do that, what's appropriate to do. And it kind of starts with the feedback that you all provided from the retreat and some of our follow-up discussions. So thankfully, our vendor, Amy, was able to summarize some of the comments that were made in the documents and the surveys that you all have submitted that really talk about our roles, the things that we'd like to see change, and kind of our pathway to change. And so when we think about our role, what was clear in a theme is overall that you all see us as a change maker, and that really was good to hear. And I think at one point there was a conversation about, if we look back and if we fast forward 25 years, we hope that, and you said that you hope to see that One Ohio has been a game changer. And that was really helpful context for us as staff to understand kind of that. What does that look like? What does that mean? And we're really looking forward into diving into that with you. And then we talked about to change what? What do we want to change? What are those game-changing things that we want to talk about? And you guys mentioned stigma, poor outcomes, barriers to treatment, lack of family supports, ability to build resilience, as all of the things that we really need to be thinking about as we talk about what are we going to be a change maker in. And so we will continue to dive into that in some of our short, medium, and long-term goals as we develop our strategic plan. And then finally, you guys gave some themes, some values, respect, accountability, acceptance. And then finally, when we think about our values and principles, you guys told us that we need to really be thinking about things like accountability, transparency, living stigma-free, and a number of other things that we will continue to just think about and develop as we think about our next steps in the strategic plan with that ad hoc committee. So all of that said, and I know I went really fast through that, we have a draft vision and mission that we want to talk to you about. We want to have dialogue in today's meeting about this. If you all have feedback, we want to hear it. And if we're not where we need to be with this draft, we will go back and continue to edit with the committee. But if you all do feel comfortable and there's some consensus, we will move forward and do a vote today to adopt this as our vision and mission. So with that, I put them both on the screen for you to see. Our vision as drafted is Ohio is a place where hope thrives, families are strong, and everyone has what they need to live with purpose and dignity. You all have said to us through a number of those conversations that we needed our vision to be aspirational. We needed our vision to be something that we can see, touch, and strive toward. And I think that the committee put together a good draft. I'd love to have them kick us off if you guys have any initial thoughts to add to this that I think gets us to that vision. And so I'll open the floor up around the vision.
I'd like to comment on the vision. We start every meeting kind of speaking to our vision. Director Baker told us a story just a little bit ago of a family where hope now thrives, where families are strengthened and they now live with dignity. And every month we hear a story like that, and occasionally we hear a story of heartbreak, which is the alternative of that. But that's what excites me about the vision. And we've been speaking to the vision at the beginning of every meeting for years. Pardon me?
Was Dr. Rosen?
I think you guys have hit it out of the park. It looks great.
Was that David?
Yes.
Okay. Dr. Rosen, I see your hands up. Michael, Rosen, is your hand up?
Yes. My statement is that I don't see any place in either the vision or mission, maybe in the promote recovery, but it doesn't say from what, meaning this is for use disorders. And I think we need something about that in both the vision and mission. Meaning I don't see that, in other words, Ohio is a place, et cetera, is perfect, but it doesn't have anything to do with recovery from use disorders or prevention of use disorders.
Chairman, I would
Go ahead, Larry.
echo Dr. Rosen's thought, especially on the mission and adding prevention, because I think that's really key if we're gonna look at long-term changing the trajectory of the addiction issues.
Another comment? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think it's great. The only thing is, I'm not sure what the wording is, but I think one of the best things about this foundation is how much you've worked hard to make it good stewards of people's money, how we've worked hard to vet things and make sure there was not a conflict of interest and make sure taxpayers' money are being spent wisely. A lot of foundations don't do that. I mean, you really went over the top with staying to make sure everything was above board. Somewhere in the mission, I don't know if the cost effective doesn't really always fit well with recovery, but somewhere we should say that it's in our mission, our vision, that you really did a good job vetting all these processes. And I just think that needs to be put in there because I think that's
So
important.
you like the idea of like good stewards or something? along
Something
that
like
line?
that. I don't know. I'm not a wordsmith, but I'm just saying, I think that's one of the things when people ask me about this foundation, I say, let me tell you, when we're awarding a grant, they've checked every box, dotted every I, and they made sure there's not a conflict of interest. They made sure it's the best practice and they were really doing their homework. And I think that we should be proud of that, but I think it should also be in the mission.
Go ahead, Denise.
So just to build on that a little bit, I mean, maybe just a word in front of the word investing, like strategically investing or thoughtfully investing or something like that, kind of emphasizes what you're talking about. And I would hope that in the mission, we talk about reducing stigma. Because it goes along with all of what we're doing.
Go ahead, Ron.
I agree with everything that's being said, but having worked on a number of these kinds of things, vision and mission is usually very straightforward, very short, very easily grasped. I think we do need to, as Larry has suggested, we do need to do something about making sure that our focus is on recovery and addiction, dealing with addiction. Otherwise, it looks like we're going to solve all the problems of everything in our state and country. So I think what's missing is we're not seeing the values and goals. And I think that's where we can cover a lot of the things that are being mentioned here. We can start loading these up to a point where nobody can really fathom what we're talking about. So I would encourage very clear statements of our vision, or I'm sorry, of our values and our goals. And I think they'll take in all these things being mentioned.
I'm at a bit of a disadvantage here, so if you guys see any hands come up, just let me know. Greta, go ahead.
I agree with, again, the discussion points and echo what Larry had mentioned. Prevention was something that even if it's promote health and recovery, something that can be captured. We don't want to see people use in the first place or not harmfully use that then leads to other things as the different drugs may change, and they will, and those kinds of things. So something around prevention beyond what you've already given a nod to through resilient communities, I think that's huge. And again, saving lives is people don't get harmfully involved in the first place. But I think we have such a unique opportunity with this foundation to uphold that strategy. And so many regions have brought prevention projects forward. I think calling that out would be super important. And that's truly how we're going to get out of the mess we're in, is by not having new cases of addiction. So I think back to what folks were saying, just thinking through how to make it specific to addiction, or honing in on, you know, who we're talking about, or Ohio is absent, you know, of addiction. I remember that discussion at the retreat. I love the vision. I think that could stand alone, maybe without the mention, just an idea. If everybody's understands that maybe it's the mission that maybe gets sharper or honed in light of what you had shared as well, around values and the other pieces that can speak to lots of specifics about who we are, what we do, how we're doing this work. But I love it. I think there's really good, I don't know, great draft on both, but I'd be for moving forward with the vision and maybe just tinkering a bit with the vision, move forward, mission, tinkering a bit.
So is there almost a consensus that the mission is fairly well encompassing of our thoughts? Just we need to play with the vision a
No,
little.
I might have mixed you up
You
with
don't like-
words. I meant to say the opposite of that.
Okay.
She likes the vision, she wants to tweak the mission.
Okay.
And I want to reiterate Ron's point about, you know, a vision and a mission should probably fit in the front and back of a t-shirt, but goals and other and values have to further explicate who we are and what we'll do.
Alicia, what were the 3 words you showed on that earlier slide? It was fund, promote, and advocate? Advocate. Fund, promote, and advocate. Okay. I'm not sure if it needs to, but I'm not sure that advocacy comes through in the mission part as it stands currently. I feel like fund and promote do, but maybe not the advocacy as much.
You need another month to work through this. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll take another month of working on these, and I really would encourage the board members just to email to Alicia and to the group, have more communication so we can have a better opportunity for consensus. So any more discussion on that point? Go ahead.
Just 2 words. Back to a little bit Dwayne's point. I do think maybe want to focus on monitor and evaluate. I think we kind of discussed that when we review grants, especially when we see, you know, maybe some new ideas. How are we ensuring that if we're looking at this program long term, how are we evaluating it or monitoring all these hundreds of agencies that maybe will receive funding? So I think maybe it goes in the values, I'm not sure, but just I wanted to toss those 2 words out as well. Maybe just evaluate our entire process, not just the entities receiving money.
All right, with that being said, then we'll move on to the Audit and Finance Committee, the June financial report. So next we have our financial report discussion up today. To follow the Audit and Finance Committee report, I'd like to turn over to Jim Quinn to share the unaudited August financial statement details with the board.
Jim stepped out.
It's almost like exit stage left.
Good luck, Evan.
Well, I can maybe give you 2 minutes here. We've been working really hard at the Audit and Finance Committee to get our arms wrapped around inflows of funds, prepayment of funds, the timing of when we need to turn our investments into regional grants. It is an ever-evolving landscape. Jim has done the lion's share of the work to make sure we understand when we can expect different payments and when those need to be approved by the board or put into different buckets. He's going to give you an extraordinary amount of information here. I think we're going to spend a good amount of discussion today leading up to some votes at next month's board meeting. So, Jim?
Okay. All right, first we'll talk about the financial report for August. August is the 8th month of the fiscal year, so we have 4 months remaining. For the operating budget, we have 61% of the money that you had budgeted back. So we're in good shape there. August was our highest month of spending, 127,000. So things are ramping up. Go to the next. The grant budget, we haven't dispersed any funds as we negotiate contracts and send out agreements. So there wasn't a lot of activity in the grant budget for August. This is our typical cash flow report in August. We netted just over 536,000 in our accounts, which is our interest, about 640,000 in interest less our expenses. So no new revenue in August. Added to these two reports, and let's go into the next one where I won't spend most of the time. So we have updated projections from Brown Greer. To this point, right, outside of the distributors and the J&J, they were just kind of broad estimates. Right? Those settlements were when they finished the legal process and we got our first payment, we asked, what's the projections for the rest? And so they posted those on, those are online. And so there's a couple things to note here. One is, as those of you who were at the July meeting heard Frank Galucci talk about, these funds are not guaranteed, right? They could change. Bankruptcies could evolve. And so it should be noted that between the last time I reported this in March and these estimates, the estimates are down 16 million. So the estimates now are 842 million dollars. The other thing to note is you see the little asterisk where it says 2024. Brown Greer has allocated the Allergan and Taba amounts, but we have not received payments. Apparently there is some issue there. I'm not sure what it is. So that just reiterates that these payments, I think it's in the incentives. So these payments include incentives. If you don't meet the incentive, the state doesn't meet the incentives, then the payments are changed. The last thing is providing context Maybe for. Jim, Yeah. can you explain that? Did the regions receive their payments and the state receive their payments?
No.
So nobody's received any payments?
Outside the first payment. Yeah, the whole state's on hold. It's not us.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
It's not us. It's the whole dollar. And the other thing to notice is that as time goes on, these payments decrease, right? Right, they're kind of front loaded, so they decrease through time. And expenses do what? They increase, they inflate, right? So the buying power of the 35 million in 2035 is not the same as the buying power of 35 million today, right? We get some clarification on Walmart. Walmart was calculated differently than all the other settlements. Walmart's was calculated upfront. All the others are annual calculations, annual estimates of calculation. Walmart, was a good thing, I guess, is we know we got 52 million, right, upfront. So that amounts, but future payments are estimates based on incentives. So I want to point that out and move into the next the allocation discussion. The last slide here we want to talk about is there was a request from numerous members to what would it take to make up 3.2 million prepayment. For those who are new, part of the distributor payment for year 18 was prepaid. That is, they paid us part of year 18 at the present value of that money, which is a 10.25 discount off of what we would have received. So we would have received 11.4 in year 18, but we received 3.2 million this year.
So KeyBank put together some projections, like what would it take to make that up? And outside a very strong market for the next decade, that would be it would be very, very difficult to do. Probably somewhere in the average market, which is about 7.7 million. So we have that today in our depository account, and then the investment committee will make some decisions and make recommendations about where that money eventually lives. Is there any questions? Does that answer the question? I think Dr. Rosen had the question.
I did.
I think it's important to keep all of this in mind as we go into our next segment of this presentation. But before we do, I think we wanted to take a vote unless there were other questions on the financial report, and then we'll roll right into the next presentation.
So actually what the motion would be is I need a motion to approve the August unedited financial report.
So moved.
Oh, was that Michael?
Yes.
Motion by Michael, Evan had the second. All right, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and the motion carries. So,
And then we'll roll right into the allocation
Right.
session.
So today we want to discuss a proposed multi-layered process for funding foundation grants and programs and projects and operations. This is just a discussion today. There will be no vote, right? I want to hear your feedback. We've met for 2 months with the Audit and Finance Committee there, and so we want to work through, similar to what you did with the Mission Vision, like questions, concerns, edit this, we'll work on this, and we'll come back at the October meeting. So move on. So let's recap, especially for those who know what we have done, what the board has done. So the board approved 54 million in allocations for the Janssen 1 and 2, and the distributor years 1 and 2, payments received in March of 23. That payment, as you may remember, is 6 months or so behind where we expected it to be in 22. At that same time, we unexpectedly received a non-MOU payment for the Mallinckrodt bankruptcy. And at that time, the board voted to put that into investments. And you created multiple budgets of those allocations. So there's an allocation process, which you allocated, and then we created budgets. From those the operations allocation, we funded 23 and 24 budgets, and you funded the 24 grant payments and grant process. From those budgets, they get converted into annual spending plans. So for example, the grants that you're approving this month, next month, they're 3-year grants. The last payment will be in the summer of 27, right? So the yearly plans will be spread out over the period in which the grants are awarded. So the point is that yearly spending plans are a derivative of budgets, which are in relationship to the allocation. So let's look at the numbers real quick. So this is the numbers from those original allocations. 93.6% to regional shares and 6.4% to the administrative and grant budgets. Any questions here? Move on to the next slide. So we felt it was important to establish some priorities, some focus, right, on what these allocation processes might look like. So the first priority is that we prioritize program activities that benefit local communities. Shares, right? Those are the top priority. The next priority is that we believe that there should be equal allocations across the settlements. So for example, whatever we allocate the program or grants, and whatever we got to operations, just as 2 examples, those percentages should be proportionally equal. so that we're not giving out Walmart grants, we're not giving out CVS grants, we don't have Walmart operating. We're basically allocating that money to the pools and then budgeting from those pools. Does that make sense? We wanted to make sure that the process accounted for uncertainty of future payments. And we know that's the case, right? We're uncertain about the future payments, right? We want to balance today's, one of the other priorities is balance today's needs, which from the applications are high, right? With long-term impact, right? It's a balancing, how do you balance that out? And the last priority was to invest in growth, innovation, and partnerships. To kind of build the ability to leverage the MOU funds, right? To grow those funds in a way. So let's go on to the next slide. We do have a few exceptions. I think we've talked about those exceptions in here before. The first exception is any prepayments are invested for maturity in the year of the original payment, right? So when 3.2 million, I think that was a decision that was made. Invest that for maturity in the year we would originally receive it. The other exception is interest earned in these funds will be pulled in those funds, just like we're doing today, right? So any interest that's currently earned on MOU funds is held in the MOU bucket for you to allocate at some point, right? And so interest is going to be held in those buckets. All right. So this is the multi-layer approach. The idea here, to meet these priorities we just laid out, we felt like that we needed to put together a process, kind of checks and balance, right? As we go through receipt of the funds to expending of the funds at the very bottom, right? What would that process look like? How would that process work? In each step of this process, right, we will evaluate future spending needs and investment opportunities. So don't think of one of these as being investment. It's spread across all of them. I'll show you in the next slide what that looks like. It's spread across all of them. Nope, don't go to the next slide. So steps 1 and 2 are just what I'm calling this distribution formula. Money comes in, this is how we're going to distribute it to these priorities, these buckets. Steps 3 and 4 are the nitty-gritty. Here's how much we're going to spend in this year, right? These are the plans for spending the money you put in the buckets. Does that make sense? These are the plans. And so this presentation, we're only going to talk about steps 1 and 2. Steps 3 and 4, we'll talk about in October, I believe we're going to bring back operations. Yes.
Jim, thank you. When you talk about the buckets, yeah, step 1 and 2, the buckets are, and correct me if I'm wrong, original bucket could be, a statewide bucket could be, an investment bucket, and what am I missing?
Operations bucket.
Correct, an operation bucket, thank you. So those will be usually the 4 buckets that we might decide step 1 and step 2, correct?
There also could be an endowment.
It's
no?
important.
Is that correct?
Yeah, we'll show you the buckets. We don't actually use those names, but those are the concepts, right?
Okay.
Those are the concepts.
Somebody had a comment. I don't. Dr. Roizen, did you have a question, sir? Comment?
I think there also could be an endowment bucket. One of the things that KeyBank talked about is, do we want the foundation to live past whatever it was, 2035 or 2038? And that was part of our discussion, still to be held.
Yes, we're calling that the Future Impact Fund. We're not calling it a down, we're calling it the Future Impact Fund. And so the idea here is money comes in, it gets swept off the top of the Future Impact Fund, then gets distributed by a formula, and then you budget off of those amounts. And you'll, as we get into it, you'll see how that works. Let's go on to the next slide. All right, this is an example of potential investment strategies at each layer, right?
at each layer, because each layer of the process has a different time horizon. Not only has a different time horizon, it might have different goals, right? And so we work with KeyBank to come up with these scenarios. So the first scenario is this future impact grant, which has a time horizon of out there, right? Year of maturity, down the road some point. You know, manage risk, right? But still a risk, right? You understand risk and reward. So to get these kind of returns, you take a certain kind of risk with those funds, right? And that'll be up to the investment committee to work through that. When money is then moved to the distribution formula, right? It's locked down a little bit more. So the time horizon is 2 to 5 years, right? Right? We modest growth, but security is key there. As you budget funds, just like you've done this year, when you budget funds, we lock the money down. FDIC insured, laddered bonds, right? For maturity. So when you budget money, we can actually award less than we budgeted. So we have to have that money to be secure. And so right now we're enjoying 5%. Probably mid next year, it's probably going to be in the 3.9 is what they're thinking, the 3.9%. And we probably all remember the years of 1% or less, right? And so that's how the investments would work with the different layers. Does that make sense? All right. Let's move. So focusing on these first two steps, I'm going to reiterate. The first process is to set aside money off of the top, right? Set the money off the top and then distribute the balance of the money to these priorities, priority buckets, priority pools, whatever you want to call them. So let's see what that looks like. So, throw me over here. So the balancing act here that the foundation has is save and spend, right? And so we believe this model provides the ability to balance current needs with long-term impact, right? It has a little perspective of both, right? Not too, I don't believe too heavily weighted on one of the two, but to balance them. We're right now talking about money coming in and putting in a pools. At later times, you'll talk about spending that money, right? That you put in these pools for these purposes, right? And I think somebody asked about
whether or not we live in perpetuity. And I think this discussion is going to be important. How long we want to live not only requires us to think about how much we want to save, but it'll also come back around to how long we want to live related to how much we spend. It has been made clear to us if it's not going to be good enough just to put money in the account and save for the future, we also have to regulate and make stable how much we're spending year over year so that we're not spending more than what we're bringing in. And so that is always going to be a part of it. The spend category is what we'll talk about in October. Today we're really focused on the save.
This model puts into these this future impact money that can be drawn down in years 12, 13, 14, because those revenues are in the 20 million range, not the 50 million range. So whether you, like you said, spending is the other side of the coin. So this is what we're recommending for 24 and 25. So for 24, we're recommending setting aside in this future impact aid 55.9 million, which is 3.2 million from the distributor payment. And the whole 57.7 million from the Walmart, we're viewing this as really like a prepayment. This is a lump sum you get right now, right? And so we're saying set that aside and get the impact fund started.
And so that's not necessarily us asking you to make a decision on this point around perpetuity or not.
Yeah.
This is really looking at that exception. This is a prepayment. We want to set aside prepayments and hold them to make sure that they are worth what that future value that we hope to see as we talked about in the earlier slides.
Build on that. This process will not allow you to live in perpetuity. You have to hit the other side of the coin, that balance, right? This might set that framework up, but it does not, if you continue to spend 50 million, you 2038, you'll be gone, right? And so for 25, we're then saying, as a general rule, set aside 10% of the settlement funds you received, that would be 8.1 million. Again, 25 is again a big lump sum payment. This includes my estimates that we'll get year 2 of the Allergan and table. So that's how and I will show you the actual numbers, but that's how we get to that number. Any questions here? This money's like just set aside right off the top.
So these are examples of how we can play out this distribution model. Let's keep working through that distribution piece, and then I think we can talk about and get your feedback on. Gotta get the numbers.
The core of the whether you're all wondering, what is that distribution?
Yeah.
So reiterating this slide again, after the money's taken off the top, we then apply a distribution formula to equally allocate, proportionally, I guess is a better word, allocate those settlement monies to the buckets. These are the 4 buckets. So Mercer, your investment, that's taken, and now we have these 4 buckets. I want you to notice that 90% of the money is being essentially allocated for local communities, which was our #1 priority. Local communities. We have it in 2 buckets, right? We have it in what we call a program bucket, and then we have a program reserve. Some money there is just set aside for, emergencies, immediate needs, overdose response, economic downturn, all those kind of things.
And I will add to this. I think that, one of the things that we've learned so far in this grant process is we locked the program money into the regions, which was intentional and appropriate. Had we had some program reserves, we could have had funds to support evaluation. So a lot of our grantees are doing some things that we thought, wow, the rest of the state could value learning from this. And so if we had a reserve fund to pull, those are the types of things that we could couple, of course, with you all's approval, along with some of these other items that are in the bucket, being responsive to the ebbs and flows. We've seen some changes at the state and federal level with funding. And we've also seen different surges happen. And so we could have some response money available to us as well within that year, if we were to have both that program and program reserve concept. And so that's kind of just some more background as to why we split those into the two groups.
Can I ask a question? Could we go back to the previous slide? Because I've been holding my question, but we're getting further down the road, so I want to ask it now. So this idea, and let me just say that I'm a regional representative. For those of you that are new, I'm a strong advocate for as much money as possible going down to the regions for the programming. And so, and just coming off of a grant committee meeting where my region and another were being evaluated, and we recognize that the amount requested far exceeds the amount available. For instance, in my region, 52 million was requested, 4 million is available. Okay, so these percentages are very dramatic, and we simply don't have enough money to address all the needs in the community. So that's my frame. So when we talk about this future impact fund, that's a new phrase for me. I understand what you're getting at, but to have that be #1 and the distribution, as I read this, to be #2 seems out of whack to me. Maybe it's just the way the sequence in which you're speaking about it, but I don't remember this board, and these are conversations that we've had in an ongoing way, saying that we want to skim money right off the top necessarily. I mean, this is what this conversation is. So I think we need to decide that as a board first before we put something on a slide that says this is what we're going to do. Because I'm not sure we've collectively decided that that is what we're going to do. We very well might decide that and say we want, there's a distribution bucket, there's the future investment bucket, there's the program or to run the show bucket, right? I understand all that, but I don't want to, I personally don't want to have the impression that some of these decisions are showing up here and we haven't had that conversation about what we want to do collectively with this money. I concur that likely there will be an investment bucket. I just think we need to have the conversation first before we put it up and say, oh, this is how we're gonna.
That's the,
how we do this.
that's the proposal. I guess what we're discussing
Okay,
here.
so I didn't want to get to distribution formulas.
This is just a
before.
proposal.
Okay.
The key being the distribution of the impact first is that it's, now you'll see on the next slide, it's applied to the MOU fund money up front. And the balance then goes to 80, 10, 7, 3. So what's the next slide?
Did this proposal come from the finance committee or where did this proposal?
No, this is the prepayment. We discussed this. In other words, these are the prepayments that were paid, that are supposed to be paid over the 18 years, but were paid in year 1, so they got the discount. In other words, Walmart paid everything in the first year. If you allocated that in the first year, you would have much less in future years.
I want to make sure we hear from our chair, Evan, if you could speak to.
Sure, you all have the added benefit of being correct. This is a discussion. We've been working with the numbers. Dr. Roizen talks about the prepayments. What do we do with that? How do we deal with that problem? Jim put up on the slides, the settlement funds significantly dropping off in the 2030s. I don't see it on the screen, but we go from having $50-ish million coming in to dramatically going down to $20 million. So we are attempting to, this isn't a final proposal, this is a discussion proposal to the board as to how we deal with all the funds coming in, with the idea of trying to give predictable, stable regional allocations for grants in the future, or else we have $50 million for the next 5-10 years, and then it turns into $20 million for the regions. So this isn't a final, this is a proposal. We wanted to have the discussion at the full board versus coming out with a proposal from the finance committee saying this is what we're going to do. This is what we're looking for feedback on. And part of the questions that we need to ask are, do we want to be in perpetuity or do we want to shut down shop at 2038? And if that's the case and that's the direction of the board, we'll probably invest our money differently.
Let's go real quickly. First, Judge Mattia, followed by Michael Rosen.
Yeah, it's obviously a complicated topic, but I just wanted to remind the group that we've had some talk that, if we are successful, there's a good opportunity we might be funded by other foundations. And, to consider that possibility, I don't know how realistic that is or not, but those funds, if they do come, could supplant the loss of any future monies that are resulted in prepayments. So this is a very complicated topic, and it's hard to digest just as it's being presented now. And it is a major strategic decision point that we're making. So I would ask that we, get more in writing in advance before we're called upon to make any kind of binding decision on this.
Thank you, Judge.
Jim, could you send out that sheet of when we are due to receive the funds as now calculated and the decrease? I mean, I think that's important to have on the board as well, because that's where this stems from. That is, there is a declining number that we will receive progressively. And the only way you keep grants coming, that's it. Is if you, in other words, if you look at, for example, year 2036, the total is 29 million. Obviously, 29 million is going to be less in purchasing power than 51 million is this year by probably a factor of almost 4. So the point is that we need to figure out if we want to keep things level on a dollar value, level on an inflation adjusted value, or how we want to do that. That's, I think, the decision made that since these prepayments, in other words, Walmart is paying 52 million, they would be paying, if they paid it out here, the equivalent of about 150 million. It's a 10.25% discount rate they take. So that's part of the problem.
Well, let me remind everybody, about a year ago, we had KeyBank do a presentation, and we used 51.5 as that base year allocation. Then we applied a 2.5% rate of inflation thereafter. So that's how we started to try to determine how much would be in regional grants per year so we could do some planning. So I mean, I know we're talking about quote unquote taking money off the top. Yeah, maybe that wasn't good wording, because we had talked about having the base at 51.5, then trying to invest beyond that, whatever comes in, so that we can keep that even cash flow to about 2035. And by even, I mean inclusive of the rate of inflation. Okay, Larry?
Thanks, Chairman. Jim, I don't know if you'd mentioned it, but I think it is worth, if you did, because I didn't hear it, that the timing is important because KeyBank has told us that we can't continue with the short-term investments, correct? That we were.
Those will be, yeah.
Right, so we need to do something with the money fairly quickly, or we're not gonna get the rate of returns we were getting before with the short-term investments.
Right, and those rates are gonna drop.
Yeah, we probably have, he is in CDs and not just money markets right now, though.
So, let me be clear, with 51 million. You can't, even with this model, you can't sustain 51 million to 2038, right? I mean, it's not possible. You're not gonna earn that kind of return, right? So,
So in our next discussion in October, when we talk about spending, we'll show you what you can do per year and what could be sustained over how many years and what those options are. But today we were trying to focus on saving and what that saving process will look like. And today is just to get feedback. This presentation and the information provided in it will be sent to each of you. You'll have the month to really look at it. The Audit and Finance Committee meeting is open, so if you want some more time, please join us at the Audit and Finance Committee meeting. And then in November, we'll come back with more answers to your questions that you've asked today, but also the recommendation from the Audit and Finance Committee. They're really listening to our conversations today and wanting to incorporate your feedback into this model. So,
by the way, if you want to serve on that committee, just email or text or call Alicia, and we will add you to that distribution list. And I'm serious, all of our committees are that way. If you want to serve, you can serve on the committee.
John.
Let's get to the numbers, because maybe.
Well, Jonathan, you've had your hand up for a while. I'll if the chair is okay with it. Jonathan, our new board member.
Oh, I apologize. Go ahead.
Sorry. We're gonna get a Jonathan, you're on mute.
No problem. Just a quick request that when you distribute those numbers, if you could show us a model for what the spending would look like and returns for if we wanted to go towards perpetuity versus some of these other spending models, just so that we can get a sense of that. That would help me. Thank you.
I will say this, one of the discussions we had a year ago regarding the funding to perpetuity is what you're really saying is, whether you like to say it this way or not, we're going to value trying to save someone 20 years from now and not someone today and tomorrow. So that's why we came up with this 51.5 as being our base year this year, last year, and trying to at least maintain that commitment to the regions. And I do think it exhausted around 2032 is when I believe it exhausted. But our hopes was then in that 15-year period we have that we would, or 10, whatever the year period is, we would build up enough reputation and credibility that we'd have those alternative cash flows, donations, things of that nature.
I speak just for a moment, because you did just touch on a key element here that we haven't been discussing, and that is future revenues. And so, you know, we're like, okay, we need this money, we need this money, we need this money. Well, this is the one pool of money that we have at the moment, but we're not talking about additional pools as a foundation that we can go out and raise money. And so our board needs to be, once we figure out what we want to do with this, we need to be looking at how do we grow and, as our mission says, make Ohio better in the long term. Okay, that's going to require more than just taking opioid settlement monies and divvying them up. It's going to take us investing in our communities, and it's going to take us reaching out to other foundations, to other entities, and raising money. And that's going to take effort, different efforts than what we've been doing, and money to do that. Got to have money to make money. So that's a thought that I think everybody needs to be thinking about.
I agree. Yeah. All
So
right, where are we now, Jim?
This is one of the numbers we proposed for the money that we have.
David, are you asking a question again?
Yeah, how did operations get to be $7.3 million? And if you carry that forward every year and increase it with inflation, that's kind of an outrageous number. And I still don't understand what the innovation 3% would be for. So that can be discussed later, but I have more questions than answers here.
These are not budgets. These are not budgets. These are allocations to a pool which you will approve budgets. Right? So we're not suggesting 83 million is the budget in that. We're suggesting that's how much you put in the pool, which the budget off of.
But you have operations is operations. I mean, it's pretty defined. It's salaries, insurance, stuff. How is it that much money?
Judge, that's not the proposed 2025 budget for operations. It could be 25, 26, 27. We're hamstrung when we get an MOU payment. We have, what is it, 90 some odd days that we have to allocate it.
That was only on the initial one.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
These are budgets. These are not budgets. Budgets are a separate discussion for how much you want to spend from the bucket.
Yeah, Jim, go back and show the budget for the year on operations, because I think it was 1.6 million. It's not 7 million, Judge.
Yeah, it's roughly 1.9 and for 2024. And so if you think about that in context, you guys created a bucket for operations that was about 3.5 million. We've spent down that 3.5 million 2022, 2023, 2024. So again, think about that yearly spending. These will create buckets, if you will, that we will draw from in years to come, understanding that our money is front loaded. And so we have to fund these buckets now if we want to exist even in the next 10 years. And so we will continue to draw down and set budgets later. That is not the discussion for today. This is how do we create buckets that we draw down from for budgets? And I hope that helps to clarify some things. And so as it relates to this, what we are recommending here, and I'm going to speed us up a little bit because I don't want to rush this conversation. I want to get you guys this information so you can read it, consume it. I hope we have some folks join us at the Audit and Finance Committee meeting. This is really saying, from everything that Jim has presented so far, that those prepayments that would go into that future impact fund, that 55 million, And that 80-10-7-3, this is what those distributions look like from the unallocated 2024 dollars. That would create those buckets at the bottom for 2024. If you fast forward to what we're projected to receive, and we continue this bucketing model with a draft, not decided 10% idea, just to give you an example of how this could play out, the buckets then are funded even more. We would put 10%, 8.1, 80%, 58 million into these buckets to continue to grow them. So what this would look like if we were to say, all right, here's what we actually did in 2023, and here's what we're proposing to do, a draft, but not, just an example, we would have put 64 million prepayments and 10% into the Future Impact Fund. And then the program budget, the program bucket would be full up to 194 million. The program reserve budget or bucket would be 7.8. Operations would have 15 million to draw down from for many years. And then the innovation bucket would be some flexible funds to do, for example, what I think Julie was referencing. We were looking at a grant recently, a federal grant. You had to put stake in the game. So if we wanted to have a match opportunity to bring down that $65 million grant, we would have had to have some flexible funds to do that. And so these types of dollars would allow us to get flexible in that way and bring, as Julie, to quote you, to spend money to make a little money, to bring those things forward. So I know that this is a lot, and I know this content is rich. Getting through that, we have some next steps, but I want to open it back up to you, Chair, to make sure we get all of the feedback we can today to build the presentation for next month.
I mean, good news is clearly this is important discussion to have, clearly. I want to make sure we have enough time. We've got grant oversight and other matters to cover today, and I don't know, I'm actually good to 1:30, but I'm sure many people aren't, so I want to make sure we cover everything. I'll make sure that we put more information into our portal, as well as, I guess we could send it by email directly also.
Can I ask just a clarifying question for when we get more information? Can you go back to the previous slide? So I think from my vantage point, it would be helpful to have the amount of money available and then the percentage breakouts from that amount of money. Because as you can see, that doesn't, if you look at the total there, it's 110%, because you're taking money off the top right away, my understanding, and then the remainder is being divvied out. I want to see the whole pot and then percentages broken out from the whole pot, not with the percentage skimmed off right away, right? And then the rest of it divvied out. So did you have that up there and I missed it?
No, it's a hidden slide.
Okay, well,
we
can we
can
all see
send
the
out all
slide?
that information. We can send it out too.
Because it's confusing because the 64 million under this skimmed off the top part is higher than, 10%, then we're dealing with what's left. So I want to see the whole bucket, what Future Impact gets, what program gets, what program reserve gets, because that's the full picture. This doesn't really convey that.
I agree.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll get that over to you.
And if you are, and I'm not joking when I say this, if a name is better than Future Impact, we can wordsmith that also.
Same concept. We just need to see the full picture before we start talking about divvying out like the remainder. I want to see the whole thing. Right?
Yeah.
Who's getting what? Which
And
portion's
neither
getting what?
decision, we really are asking two. We need that divvying out what we're gonna do at the first step and the second step. So we'll give you that information and we can project out some things. I think we got a lot of good feedback today to build on.
Yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead.
And I'll just say, Future Impact Fund is our endowment. We are having conversations with other successful foundations who, for donations that come in the door, any donation, they put a percentage in their endowment. And we're trying to find what the sort of industry standard for the percentage could be. Understanding prepayments would throw off our amounts.
I throw off the
of percentages, yeah.
So again, remember, we'll have a couple of important meetings in October that should be in your inbox or on our onboard. And again, everybody's welcome to attend the audit and finance. And if you want to volunteer to be on the committee, just let us know. Should we move on to grant oversight then at this point? Thank you. I'll turn right now to Alicia and Sarah to give us updates on the grant process.
I'm up. So good to see you all. So this is the 6-step process in our 2024 regional grant cycle. We are done with 1 and 2. So all of our regions are either in step 3, 4, 5, and we're starting to get some in 6. So just as a reminder, our 6 steps, I will now show you in more detail, specifically where each of the regions are, because we have a number of sub-steps within each of those. So on the far left, you'll see each of the steps color-coded. We have 5 regions that are still reviewing, which means we have 13 regions that are done with their grant review process. Wait, that's 18, 14, oh my gosh. We have 14 regions that are done. And from there, you can see we have regions that are in a number of these steps at the same time, because as we've been saying, this is all happening on a rolling basis. So we're able to have a lot going on at the same time. So the staff is doing the budget review while our expert panel is reviewing. After expert panel reviews, it goes to the grant oversight committee. But sometimes we have grants that we need to go back and ask some clarifying questions of. So that's why you might see them in 2 different stages. And then go to the grant oversight committee. Again, sometimes we have some follow-up questions from there. And then to the board. So again, we're moving forward what we can and continuing to work on those grant applications where we have some questions. So a lot is happening, but major progress has been made. And we expect these remaining 5 regions to be done by October 2nd. And a reminder of the grant agreement process. So once the foundation board approves the region's grants, the foundation staff will work on budget negotiations and what we're calling a finalist verification form. Because for especially those that receive partial funding, making sure we have an updated budget, outcomes, get their finance director's contact information, all of those key details. From that, we will make a grant agreement, get that signed. And once both parties have signed the grant agreement, we will make a public announcement about who and what and how much and what region. And so those will be, we will be so loud and proud about all of those. So if you don't get our emails, please sign up, follow our social media. We're going to be putting these out on a regular basis. So not only communicating them that way, but also on our website. We're going to be putting all of the grant awards on there. Again, that is not until we have the signed grant agreements. So lots to come on that rolling basis. And then the next slide is, we saw this earlier, again, more details about that grant announcement. So we can move on to get into the grants. So today we will be discussing a number of grants, really exciting. First up, we have Region 17, that is Mircha, so we can see where Region 17 is. They received 51 applications. They recommended 18 for a total amount of 1.6 million, so almost all of their regional allocation. And so today we'll be discussing 5 of those. And then here's the breakdown of where they are kind of in their abatement strategy by dollar amount. So this is everything they recommended. Next, we will be discussing Region 5, Summit County. They recommended 9 applications for their entire regional allocation of just a little over 1 million. And today we will be discussing 8 of those 9. Next up, and then here's the breakdown of all 9 of their recommendations by abatement strategy. So a lot in recovery. Then we have Region 8, Montgomery County. They are recommending a total of 13 grants for 100% of their regional allocation. So just a little over 4.1 million. The board today will be voting on 8 of their 13 applications. And then last but not least is Region 16. So Alicia, we're so glad you're here. That is a northwest part of the state. And they recommended 8 grants for 100% of their regional share. We can click, it's not working. Oh, there we go. The 8 grants for 100% of their regional share, so a little over $650,000. And the board will be voting on all 8 of their grants today. And then here's the breakdown. So again, lot and recovery supports from Region 16.
So move to executive session and get into detail.
All right, at this time, in order to discuss these in more detail, since it involves matters of contract, we'd like to have a motion to go into executive session for grant and public education grant negotiations.
So moved. Mr.
By
Jonathan.
Mr. Gregoire, seconded by Greta. And Laura, I think we'd like to have a roll call on that.
Director Amen,
Yes.
Director Andrew,
Yes.
Director Mason,
Yes.
Director Mayor,
Yes.
Director Bruce,
Yes.
Director Luce,
Yes.
Director St. John,
Yes.
Director Dodge,
Yes.
Director Dreehouse,
Yes.
Director Hohato,
Yes.
Director Tyler Lee,
Yes.
Director Matea,
Yes.
Director Picarilli,
Yes.
Director Johnson,
Yes.
Director Silac, Director Gregoire,
Yes.
Director Kidd,
Yes.
Director Lee,
Yes.
Director Radcliffe,
Yes.
Director Roizen,
Yes.
Director White,
Yes.
Director Baker,
Yes.
Director Kleemeyer.
Okay, I had 21 in favor. So at this point, we are going into executive session. So we're back in session. So what I'll do for, I hate to say for simplicity, if the motion's wrong, then I'll take the blame for having the motion wrong rather than teeing it up. So there's gonna be 2 different things we're voting on. One's gonna be on grants and one's gonna be on the One Ohio Public Education. So at this point, let's talk about the grants. I just need a motion to approve 29 grants recommended by regions 5, 8, 16, and 17 for an aggregate of $3,590,926.55. So I'll need a motion. Was that Michael?
Yep.
Second, well, Jim moved his hand and it's his first meeting, so. Is there any? Yeah. So you'll get your name in the minutes. So is there any discussion on the motion? We can do this by voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, and the motion carries. Okay, the next item we had discussed was we need a motion for a total not to exceed of $250,000 for use in 2024 and 2025 to support the development of One Ohio Public Education Plan. Again, that was multi-pronged, I'll just call it. So is there a motion?
So moved.
Who's the second? Can you guys see behind me? I'm looking. Second, go ahead. Any discussion on that motion? All right, again, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
You opposed? Motion carries. So far, we're almost done. I just want to remind everybody that our next meeting will be right here in the State Library. Doesn't have the date on here, but what is it, like October 10th or something?
October 9th
9th.
and then the 20th.
But the one here will be your standard in-person and virtual, 10:30 or 12:30. And the one after that on the 29th will be the one that is purely virtual. So with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Go ahead, Dan.
before we adjourn, while our vote only took probably 30 seconds, I just want to acknowledge all of the work that has gone into this whole process. I'm not sure when the staff sleeps, but their attention to detail, making sure we're getting all of our questions answered, is really a phenomenal body of work, and just want to publicly acknowledge that.
Very, very well said, Don. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Don and then Radcliffe second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.